My name's Mark Schuster. I'm Ku-ring-gai Council's Bushfire Technical Officer, and I'm virtually on location at a house in Ku-ring-gai Council area. Now, we're very close to a very large reserve here. Ku-ring-gai Council is known for its very leafy suburbs, and this is certainly typical of many of them. We've got a reserve with some very large blue gum trees, turpentines, all sorts of very large trees up to 30 metres. And with that beauty, of course, comes a risk, and that risk is bushfire in the summer weather, which we're now approaching, or very soon anyway. So what I'm going to take you through today is an actual house assessment, how you can further bushfire-proof your house. Now, we're going to talk about something called retrofitting. Many of you may have heard about it. Retrofitting is where you can upgrade your house to further withstand bushfire impacts. And I want to talk a bit about some of the concepts of bushfire attack. There's two methods of bushfire attack basically when a bushfire comes to you. One is called radiant heat, and that can be direct flame contact onto the house wall, and the other is ember attack. Ember attacks where bits of bark go up in the air, carried strongly by wind. They can carry for kilometres. Now, bushfire researchers have found out in Australia that 85% of all house losses aren't due to the radiant heat or direct flame contact on your walls, but the embers actually landing on or near your house, setting up small spot fires and starting a house fire, which if houses are close together can then spread to the next house. So ember attacks, particularly pertinent to our case in Ku-ring-gai. No house is probably immune to ember attack actually, from what I've seen to date. Now, with ember attack is something called BEL, and it's the bushfire attack level. There's all different BEL ratings, from BEL low right down the bottom, and James will show you these after, up to BEL flame zone. What BEL flame zone is, basically a house is built to structural requirements to withstand direct flame contact in a high level bushfire. That's called BEL flame zone. There's various categories, BEL 40, BEL 29, BEL 19, and BEL 12.5 as you go down the scale. And retrofitting is all about upgrading your house at least one level up the scale to withstand bushfire. So we're going to look at the construction levels. There is what's called the Construction Bible for bushfire prone areas. It's known as AS 3959, Construction in Bushfire Prone Areas. And that's a great guide and almost a Bible for builders to upgrade your house to a different BEL level. As we go through this assessment, we're not going to just look at the construction level of the house and what you can do, but also at landscaping aspects. Because by landscaping your house, you can always upgrade your house, so to speak, to withstand further pressures. You've got setback distances that will help you so you don't get direct flame contact. So this is called step one in climate-wise communities. And I'm now going to hand back over to James in his mobile studio to take us through what's known as step two. And step two is really your personal situation. Do you have pets? Are you prepared? So thanks.
Thank you very much, Mark. As Mark mentioned, I will walk you through the Climate-wise Communities website, in particular the So, I'm walking on to the process now. Simply go to the home page, scroll down and click on the recheck button. And the first page you see is the agree basically a disclaimer page. So there's nothing too exciting. Areas of Ku-ring-gai have been mapped, so if your property has not been identified as
This or this.
So, as Mark said, step one is map your location. So, what you need to do, if you can follow along, is put on any web browser, type in climatewisecommunities.com. I'll post a link to the website in the chat later. Because we are on live on location, we'll address all your questions at the end of the webinar. So, if you can follow along at home, what you need to do is plug your address into the search bar there. Say, for example, we use a property, I think it's 33 Vale. If you do, well, we get to see your property here. Sorry, there. Bell Street, and this is a typical house. Nothing out of the just a house that happens to have a few of the issues that were affected. Here you can see that it shows that the property has the red is bushfire prone, is bushland. Yellow is bushfire prone land, and it's flooding, it's flooding. Right is Ember Attack. So as you can see on the table here, this property has all the different houses that are affected by bushfire, Ember Attack, exit issues. Exit issues are not marked. That's the one hazard that are. You also have flood, storm, and heat wave. All properties in Ku-ring-gai are defaulted to be affected by storm and heat wave. Now, as you can see, there's a saved PDF button here. It's important to save each step as you go along because the climate wise streaming this website does not save any information. Council does not information. We don't save it. I think you can agree that that's a great way to go. So step 2 is your emergency situation. Now, this is a very important part of your bushfire plan. Because it is a home assessment, we won't go into too much detail of step 2, sorry. It is a very important thing to do. This step covers off on important details such as children, elderly, and the website, if you tick any one of these boxes, it will provide prompts relative to that. So we'll go through to these over these elements here. Household. Again, once you finish that, you save the step to PDF. So the next step is step 3, which Mark will then cover. So back.
Okay, folks, ready? Okay, folks, before we get underway with the actual house assessment, hope that's going. Before we get underway with the house assessment, I'd like to mention something about AS 3959, construction in bushfire prone areas. And what I want to mention is that many houses in Ku-ring-gai Council area, as in many areas in Australia, were built before 1999. That's when the construction standards actually came in, construction in bushfire prone areas. So prior to that, there was no BAL or construction level rating for bushfire prone areas. So many houses aren't actually ratified for any bushfire rating, so to speak. So any of these upgrades you do, which are known as retrofitting, can certainly improve, take up your construction level. So we're going to go through both the house and the landscaping levels to look how we can improve the situation. Now you can see in this typical house, we've got fairly non-flammable plants, garden plants, which is great. It reduces the hazard. If we have one, now we'll just walk around and have a look firstly at the wall structure. We'll start on the wall, we'll look at the roof around the back. And you can see with this typical wall, it is brick and it's got rendering on top of it, makes it really good, not quite so flammable. A weak point you've got here is timber frames. Of course, many houses have timber frames. There is an actual standard to work out timber resistant bushfire materials, so that could be probably looked at. The really good thing here is the mesh you've got. You've got bushfire resistant mesh, and you can have bushfire resistant metal shutters. What you've got to remember is to have them of corrosive, so it won't corrode. It's got to be metal or aluminium. And the big point is that the gaps in the mesh have got to be less than 2 mils, because an ember can get through anything less than 2 millimeters. So really important, but that's in the Australian standards. And the wall's great with the rendering over the brick, makes it fairly resistant. Down here, we've got what's called a vent or a weep hole, and another area where embers can get in, particularly in this case. You see what I'm handling here, can't you? It's mulch or wooden chips. Embers love that. They'll land from over the road and start a little spot fire. And of course, if you've got the mesh there, it prevents the embers getting through. The only thing, you can see the diameter on these might be about, I'd say 4 millimeters. Again, it should be less than 2 millimeters. And again, it's got to be corrosive resistant material or aluminium. So I would regard you should replace that maybe to 2 millimeters. It looks about 3 to 4 easily there. So many of the low plants, what you've got to do in a garden is decrease the connectivity, the spatial connectivity of plants, have them separated, so less chance of them all catching fire. So we're going to look at, we will look at a gutter around here. We've got a gutter, it's metal of course, which is great. And what you can do if you've got good gutters, before a bushfire event, what you do is get some wet socks, put them up the top of the gutter, block the gutter, and fill the gutter with water. Unless, of course, you had a sprinkler system, which is really great. Also, your own sprinkler system, and there's good designs for roof sprinkler systems. Again, we'll talk about the roof structure when we get to the back of the house. Over here, we've got a lovely hedge, nicely pruned. And again, it's not a native plant. It's fairly, of course, any plant during a big bushfire will catch fire, but these are fairly fire resistant. So the CFA in Victoria has a lovely list of fire retardant or resistant plants, and you can get that list for plantings around your house. Again, as we go down the side of the house, you can see the vents again, and again, this lovely rendered brick material. If you had timber, peeling timber, you'd tend to replace it. And over near the garden here, you can see this probably treated pine, fairly flammable, particularly in dry weather. If you've got a year or two's drought, they can dry out and will certainly catch. So that's an issue. So we're going around the side of this typical Ku-ring-gai house. Many people have gates, of course. See it here. This one's nicely painted. It is timber material. I don't think it's pine. It could be a heavier hardwood, which is great. And it has a metal frame. So the more metal you can get into a gate, the better the situation. So that's gates. And many people have them. See here, the wall actually is Besser blocks or concrete, really great, rather than timber fence. But you can see some overhanging plants here. And during a fire, these can easily catch. Trampoline, very flammable, of course, as are these two areas here. And you can see here, we've got a roller door and it's metal, which is great. So I give that a big up. Exposed timber, a no-no, really, any exposed timbers. So they should be enclosed with bushfire resistant materials. And you can see there is a sort of a guard there, but again, it's plastic. I'd prefer that to be metal. Now, two big issues I've got over here are the Ember Catchers, this beautiful umbrella to shade us during the sun, keep the skin cancer off, and also this awning. I wouldn't recommend them. They can catch and light up embers really easily. So again, there's those two aspects. Beautiful garden, lack of both horizontal and vertical connectivity, which is great. So we'll have a look around the back of the house. We've got all these vents up here and some weep holes. Again, they're not covered, the higher vents. They're open to Ember Attack, as is the windows here. You can see they're peeling paint, and which fires actually love. They'll lap it up, and you can see the frames, they're all timber and no bushfire shutters or bushfire mesh across them. So that's a really big issue. Bits of timber near the house, that's not too nice, really. There's a subfloor area. You can look in, you can see timber down on the floor. If an ember were able to get in through this door, I think it's about only yes. This again, you've got landscaping materials here. You've got all the beautiful wood chips, and you also have a wooden fence, which is pretty well a no-no. Colorbond's nice too. And we're going down the back. Everyone loves their cubby houses, made of very light pine, would certainly catch, that's for sure, in the event of a bushfire. So I wouldn't mind putting that away. Now we're going to look up on the roof. A nice simple structure that roof has. So embers would just roll off into the gutter. And a really big thing, of course, is gutter guard, to have gutter guard on your roof. And it again has to be metal mesh with that 2 millimeter thickness diameter. So really important. You can see a little skylight up there. It's really important to have sealant, a bushfire resistant sealant around that skylight. So most important. But the simpler the roof structure, even if you're making a a new house in a bushfire prone area is to have a simple roof structure. You wouldn't have re-entrant corners where the actual embers can lie and catch, particularly if you don't clean a roof, get all the leaves off. Now we're going down the back, again, a nice simple garden. The really big issue, I suppose, is the wooden fence. And I'm going right down the back of the yard, lovely yard. See, the plants are well spaced apart, not too many natives. Now we do have a really big native in the back, it's lovely. I love all my native trees. And this one is a big paper bark, but you can see how papery it is. You know what happens in a fire, don't you? All these drift off in the wind, very long embers, and that's what can happen. Spread the fire into another yard and another house. So that's a very quick look over this yard and house, just some quick tips. And the CFA in Victoria, Country Fire Authority, produces a beautiful document on fireproofing and retrofitting your house. And I'm just moving up the yard a bit, back up the yard. And so that's what's called step 3, folks. And that's really the house assessment itself. Next comes step 4, and that is really your community. Aspects like, are your neighbours prepared to go? Do they have transport? Are they elderly? Do they even speak English? Do they understand what's happening? And also the alert systems from RFS, from council. How do you receive alerts in a bushfire emergency? The really big issue I've seen is the number of one-way in, one-way out streets. All you need is a tree to come across at the top of the street and bang, you're stuck in there. If you've ever been in a bushfire, you'll know the smoke impacts that happen, pretty extensive, and that can confuse you. So it's really important to know your neighbourhood, and James will take us through step 4, which is knowing your neighbourhood, bushfire capability. So thanks for that, and over to step 4 and to James. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, for that. And as Mark said, I will now step you through both step 3 and step 4. So we'll go back to the Climate-Wise Communities website. And this step, I'll just simply summarize what Mark has covered off and show you what step 3 in the Climate-Wise Communities looks like. So without going into too much detail, if you're in the Climate-Wise Communities Ready Check tool, you click on step 3 and you scroll down to until you can see the 4 hazards that typically affect homes in Ku-ring-gai. We don't have time to go through all 4 hazards, especially as we're only really considering bushfire in this webinar. So if you click on bushfire, it should expand down and you can see all the different elements of the house are represented here, and they are color coded. So red is a serious weakness, orange is a moderate weakness, blue is fairly resilient, and green is strongly resilient. So, and as you saw, Mark, he covered off on the roof design, roof material, age, sprinklers, roof lights, etc., etc. So what you need to do, or what if you want, you can go and tick the part of the house that's relevant to you, of your home for that matter, and say if you have a house with complex corners, you tick the red box there, or maybe you have a simple house design like this house it has, and you scroll down and you go through all the different parts of the house that Mark has already identified and tick what is applicable to you. So without going, it's quite an extensive section. It covers off a lot of details. So we won't go through each one now, but we'll just simply skim through and just give you a general idea about what's covered in step 3. An important point to mention is this house doesn't necessarily have a swimming pool, but if you did have a swimming pool with a diesel pump would be very handy in terms of helping fight a fire. Also, a swimming pool and a large water tank can also be a great asset to the RFS who might be in attendance, because they can use your swimming pool or the water in your tank to help fight a fire, or help put the fire out next door, which could also help you, because house-to-house ignition is a major factor in bushfire emergencies. So as you scroll on down, you can see all these different things, all the different elements that affect the resilience of your house to bushfire. One thing that Mark did mention was earlier on was the bushfire attack level, or BAL. So again, if you know your BAL level or you don't know, you can always get a bushfire consultant to give you an assessment. But simply ticking this box also just reaffirms what is relevant to you. So that's step 3. If you happen to have flood issues, you can go do the same process for flood. But I highly recommend everyone does the same process for heat wave and storm, because everyone is affected by heat wave and storm. As mentioned before, you can save each step to a PDF and save it to your computer so you can have it for future reference. And as Mark mentioned, there's a step 4, which is your neighborhood. Again, we'll skim through this very quickly, but it's still important to go through this and sort of pay some consideration to how your neighborhood can help you. For example, do you know your neighbors? Will they be able to help you if you needed help, or would you be able to help them? Are they elderly? Are they infirm? Do they have children? They might have children who are at home during school during summer holidays and might need help leaving in case the roads are blocked. And your neighborhood can be an asset as well as to you during a crisis. So go through, without going into too much detail, you can do this at home in your own time, but I'll simply just cover off on these small issues. You scroll down, and again, at the bottom of this page, there are some very useful links that may come in handy. So it covers off on how NBN operates during a blackout, digital radio information, emergency alerts over your phone, and a link to the Red Cross Get Prepared app. Now, step 5 is information for your plan. Now you can put all the information that Mark covered off on, and all the information which you can put in that you generate during step 1 through to step 4, you can put into your bushfire plan. There's also plans from the RSES, the Red Cross, and Carers Australia. Now, your plan should also include contingencies for sheltering in place if there's not enough warning or if it's too late, and what you plan to do if you decide to stand and defend. Also, now's a very good time to mention that Ku-ring-gai Council has some bushfire retrofit rebates. We've recently upgraded the offering to residents, where you can get 25% of retrofit costs capped at $1,000. And this is available to residents every 5 years. So again, on step 5 is a link to where you can find information about the bushfire retrofit there. So thank you very much for coming to this bushfire home assessment, and I'll just cut over to Mark to close off on our session.
Okay, folks, we've had a good look at the house assessment and going through the Climate-Wise Communities toolkit, so to speak, looking at your house and how you can further bushfire proof it this season and coming bushfire seasons. Luckily, we've had a bit of some rain spells earlier on, so it's probably reduced the risk a bit, but there's always a risk there. And I do want to emphasise that it's not only being at that bushland-urban interface, that's not the only aspect. If you're probably 2 or 3 streets away, there should be concerns still about Ember Attack, particularly during strong winds. We get the strong southerly busters or persistent southwesterlies coming through, so that will increase the chance of Ember Attack. I hope you've gained from looking at what we've said today, just even a few handy points to try and retrofit your house to some extent. Probably the big issues are along your gutters, the gutter guards, bushfire resistant metal. Remember that mesh size of about 2 millimetres, covering weep holes, vents, and also the landscaping aspect of your house and making sure windows have bushfire shutters on them, bushfire proof shutters or screens at least, mesh screens. So I hope it's been an advantage. Again, I'm Mark Schuster, Ku-ring-gai Council's Bushfire Technical Officer, and I'm coming to you live actually from lovely leafy green Ku-ring-gai Council. Thanks for that, and I hope you've enjoyed it. Bye.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Mark. Now, due to some technical issues, some of the questions that were posted in the Q&A section were lost. So now, if it's okay with Mark, we can perhaps do answer some questions. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask, please send them through. Send them through now. So we have a few more moments. If no one's got any questions, we can always we can end it there, but we'll hang around for another 30 seconds in case anyone has any questions. There were some that were posted, but due to my connectivity issues, they were lost. Okay, well, if no one has any other questions or thinks of a question later on, there is a section where we can, it's called Ask an Expert. It's a section of the ClimateWise Community's website, and I'll quickly show them to you now. In fact, there's another part of the website which I forgot to mention. So anyway, if for any questions that come up after the workshop, you can always go to ClimateWise Community's website, click Ask a Local Expert, and in this section, you can always post your question there, and it will come to me, and I'll send it to either Mark or someone in the RFS can answer it, or any other experts. We have experts such as bushfire architects and flooding experts and heatwave experts who can answer your questions. And one very important thing I forgot to mention was the what if part of the website. So if you go through the Ready Check and you've done step 1 all the way through to step 5, and you've made a bushfire plan, this part of the website will help you test your plan and make sure that your plan will actually work in case the unexpected is to happen. Let's say, if we spin the wheel, it will throw up a random scenario. And let's see, what if there's no warning? Well, would you be able to, would your plan be suitable for you if there's no warning? What does your plan say about that? Would you be able to cope with a sudden alert to say that there's a fire next door and you don't really have time? Will you, does your plan cover off on that? Okay, so that's all of the ClimateWise Community's website. So I'll end that portion of the presentation now, and we can go back to, say, some questions. I believe once someone's posted up a question, retrofit materials where available. That, I think, a lot of bushfire consultants should be able to answer that question. I believe a lot of building supply companies have information on materials. So I'm not entirely sure where you get all the different kind of materials, but if you want, we have a webinar coming up, I think next week. Architect Nigel Bell will be covering off on bushfire retrofits from an architectural point of view. So he'll be able to answer that question. So if you do sign up to the workshop for next week, Architect Nigel Bell should be able to help you out with that and provide a much more comprehensive answer than myself, because I'm not necessarily an expert on these things. So I think that is all the questions in the Q&A. Hold on, there's another question here from Janet. How can we sign up to this workshop next week? Okay, so if you go to the ClimateWise Community's website, I'll show you it now. If we go to the workshop page, here you will see all the different workshops we have scheduled. So here you have the workshop with Mark today, that's now. But if you scroll down, we have the bushfire retrofits with Architect Nigel Bell. And I can just quickly mention that I was at a conference with Nigel last week, the Bushfire Construction Conference up in the Blue Mountains, and he's very good. I would highly recommend you sign up to the workshop. He presents almost every year at the conference, and he really is an expert on how to retrofit your homes to bushfire. And yeah, so I highly recommend coming along. He really knows his thing. He works, and of course, the Blue Mountains is one of the most bushfire affected areas in all of Australia. And he does a lot of work there. So he really knows how to help residents become resilient to bushfire. So if you click on that button there, you can register. And the next one after that, we have on the 20th of October. It's a 3D bushfire simulation and ClimateWise Community's website, workshop, sorry. So you can sign up for those two events on the website there. Okay, so let's go back and see if there's any other questions. I think we've answered that one. Okay, Phil asks, what's involved in setting up a CFU? For those who don't know, a CFU is a community fire unit. Those are set up with the assistance of the Fire and Rescue New South Wales. So what you need to do is contact your local Fire and Rescue office or brigade, I think it's called. Or you can simply, I think on the website, on the Fire and Rescue website, there should be information about who to call to get a CFU set up. So I think that, I hope that answers your question. I haven't had to do that myself, but I've seen the CFU in action, and they can be quite handy. And setting up a CFU is a great way of getting your street involved in bushfire preparedness. It's a great way of getting to know your neighbors and connecting with everyone. And a strong community, a strong neighborhood is a neighborhood that can help you in a crisis. Having had my house devastated by a hailstorm, I can attest to the fact that good community spirit is a great way of getting through a pretty tough time. So I hope that answers your question there. Okay, so if there's no other questions, we might end it there. So again, I just want to say thank you very much to Mark Schuster for hosting this bushfire assessment. And if you have any questions, please send them through to us from via the ClimateWise Community's website, the Ask an Expert portion of the website there. And also thank you very much to Emma for letting us film at her property. So again, thank you very much for coming to this webinar, and I hope to see you all at the next workshop on the I think on the 30th of September, and the 3D bushfire simulation workshop on the 20th of October. So, and please go onto the Ku-ring-gai Loving Living Facebook page to find out about all other different events we have running here. So yeah, well, thank you very much, and I will I sign off. All right, all the best. Thank you very much. Goodbye.